The story opens inside the buzzing heart of a Manhattan skyscraper, where Julia Parker, only 26, is already carrying the weight of 3 lives on her narrow shoulders. She's not just a secretary, she's the pulse of Daniel Cross's empire. The one person who keeps the chaotic stream of calls, emails, appointments, and crises from swallowing the CEO whole. We see her darting between desks, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors as she answers phones with one hand, types rapid-fire emails with the other, and balances a coffee tray precariously against her hip. The office is alive with ambition, gossip, and fear. Whispers follow her whenever she rushes past. People admire Julia's stamina but pity her loyalty. "She'll burn out by 30, one assistant mutters. But Julia doesn't care. To her, this job isn't just survival, it's a stepping stone. She craves success, recognition, and maybe, deep down, a way to prove that she's more than just someone's helper. Her boss, Daniel Cross, looms like a myth in this world. At 34, he's already untouchable. A man who built his fortune ruthlessly, whose sharp eyes can cut through excuses in seconds, and who never blurs the line between business and pleasure. Julia has only seen him soften once for a passing smile to a major investor. For her, he's an impossible figure, more statue than human. Yet there's an unspoken electricity every time she delivers his files, every time he glances at her across a meeting room. Julia doesn't acknowledge it, not even to herself, but the world she's entered is one where danger and desire sometimes wear the same tailored suit. The moment that changes everything comes late one evening, long after most of the office has emptied and the lights of New York flicker below like restless stars. Julia is summoned into a board meeting she has no business attending, her notepad clutched tightly as she takes minutes. The room is filled with power, older men in expensive suits, voices heavy with authority. At the head of the table sits Daniel Cross, calm, unreadable, his words sharp as blades as he outlines a brutal cost-cutting strategy. Julia, bone-tired and running on caffeine, hears numbers and names that twist in her gut. Layoffs, whole departments gutted. She bites her tongue until she can't. Before she realizes it, her voice cuts through the silence. But that doesn't make sense. Cutting them will save money short term, but you'll lose clients too. The air freezes. Heads turn. The board stares at her like she's grown 2 heads. Secretaries do not speak in boardrooms, especially not against Daniel Cross. Her stomach drops. She braces herself for the dismissal, the humiliation. But instead, Daniel leans back in his chair. His lips twitch into something dangerous, something close to a smile. His eyes, sharp, calculating, study her like she's a puzzle he's suddenly interested in. And then he says it, low and deliberate. Finally, someone with guts. Gasps ripple around the table. Julia feels her face flush hot, her heart pounding so loudly she can barely hear. In that instant, she doesn't know whether she saved herself or destroyed her future. All she knows is that she has Daniel Cross's full attention now, and that may be far more dangerous than losing her job. Sleep doesn't come that night. Julia lies awake, replaying the moment over and over, cursing herself for speaking, then clutching at the strange thrill it sparked. By morning, dread has settled heavy in her chest. She walks into the office braced for termination papers, expecting whispers of her downfall. Instead, she gets a summons. Daniel Cross wants to see her. The air feels colder as she steps into his office, sleek, glass walls reflecting the city, his presence filling the room like gravity. He doesn't speak immediately, just studies her with those piercing eyes that make her feel both stripped bare and invincible. Finally, he breaks the silence. "You're not like the others," he says quietly, almost as if testing her. "Don't ever hide that." His tone isn't warm, but it isn't cold either. It's something sharper, something dangerous, like an unspoken challenge. Julia blinks, caught off guard. She expected fury, punishment, at least a reprimand. Instead, she finds herself standing in the crosshairs of his curiosity, flattered and terrified in equal measure. She mumbles a thank you, unsure if it's the right response. He smirks, as if reading her confusion, then dismisses her with a wave of his hand. As she walks out, her legs feel weak, her thoughts tangled. Something has shifted, not just in how he sees her, but in how she sees him. The man who was once untouchable, distant, now feels closer, not approachable, but interested. Julia knows it's a dangerous spark, one that could ignite into something she isn't ready for. Yet as she returns to her desk, she can't shake the feeling that for the first time, Daniel Cross truly saw her. And that may be the beginning of everything. Julia. Parker grew up in a world far removed from glass towers and corporate boardrooms. She was born in a small town where everybody knew everybody, where dreams often died quietly under the weight of bills and broken promises. Her father left when she was 10, leaving her mother to raise Julia and her younger brother, Ethan, on the thin thread of a part-time job at the local diner. Julia, the eldest, stepped into responsibility long before most kids her age even thought about it. She became the caretaker, the problem solver, the one who made sure Ethan's school shoes were polished even if her own were falling apart. Despite the hardships, Julia was brilliant in school, sharp, determined, with teachers whispering she had the makings of a lawyer. Law became her dream, her escape, her way to rewrite the story her family had been forced into. But dreams are expensive. Tuition for law school was a mountain she couldn't climb, no matter how many scholarships she applied for. So she set her ambitions aside, at least for now, and took the secretary job in New York. To most, it was just paperwork, coffee runs, and being invisible. To Julia, it was survival. Her paycheck went straight back home to keep the lights on, to pay for Ethan's textbooks, to ease the weight off her mother's tired shoulders. Every morning when she puts on her blazer and fixes her hair, Julia carries with her not only her own dreams, but the quiet hope of her family. She's ambitious, yes, but her ambition is not selfish. It's rooted in responsibility and sacrifice, in the unyielding belief that one day she'll find a way to trade these endless hours for the courtroom she was born to stand in. Daniel Cross, by contrast, was forged in fire of another kind. Unlike Julia, he didn't grow up poor, but he grew up broken. His father was a wealthy businessman who taught Daniel early that trust was weakness. When Daniel was just 16, he discovered that his father had siphoned away money, preparing to abandon the family with another woman. And his mother, already brittle from years of indifference, didn't fight for him. She left too, disappearing overseas without a backward glance. The betrayal hollowed him out. That night, Daniel made himself a promise. Never again would he let emotions dictate his fate. He worked like a machine through college, building businesses brick by brick, carving his empire out of sheer determination and a ruthless refusal to depend on anyone. By 34, he was a CEO whose name was both feared and admired on Wall Street. His motto, whispered among employees, became legend: never let emotions ruin power. To his staff, he was ice, a man who didn't laugh, who didn't fraternize, who never mixed business with pleasure. They admired him, but they also whispered about him with a kind of awe, as though he were more force than human. But underneath the armor, Daniel was still haunted by the shadows of abandonment. Every deal, every acquisition, every cold dismissal was a way of proving he couldn't be hurt again. He controlled everything, even himself. Love, he told himself, was just leverage people used to control you. Yet when Julia Parker, his young secretary, accidentally challenged him in front of the board, Daniel felt something stir. Not just irritation, but interest. She wasn't afraid of him, and that, in his tightly wound world, was more dangerous than betrayal. The weeks after that late-night meeting shift the air between them. Julia notices it first in the smallest details, the way Daniel's eyes linger a moment longer when she speaks, the rare but deliberate pauses when he asks for her opinion in meetings, as though testing her insight in front of others. He begins entrusting her with tasks outside the usual scope of a secretary, responsibilities that make her pulse race with both pride and fear. To the rest of the office, she's still invisible, but to Daniel, she's become noticeable. Her best friend, Claire, is the first to warn her. Over drinks one night, Claire narrows her eyes. "Office romance with your boss? That never ends well, Julia. Don't even play with that fire." Julia laughs it off, insisting nothing is happening. And yet, deep down, she can't deny the tension, the subtle current that seems to hum whenever Daniel's voice dips lower while giving her instructions, or when his hand brushes too close as he passes her files. She tells herself she's imagining it, that he's simply testing her professionalism. But then comes the corporate party. The champagne flows, cameras flash, and the city's elite crowd the marble ballroom. Julia is out of place, tugging at her modest dress when suddenly Daniel is there, hand outstretched, commanding in his quiet way. He leads her to the dance floor. For a brief moment, the world falls away, just his hand at her waist, his gaze locked with hers, the rhythm pulling them into something dangerously intimate. A shutter clicks. Cameras capture them. Julia's stomach twists. In that single flash of light, reality crashes down. If anyone sees this, the whispers, the rumors, the consequences, her career isn't just at risk. It could be over before it even begins. It happens late one night, long after the rest of the office has gone dark. The glow of the city seeps through the glass walls, casting Daniel's office in sharp golden shadows. Julia sits at her desk outside, typing up the final notes from a meeting. When his voice cuts through the silence, "Julia, step inside." She obeys, heart pounding. She tells herself it's just another task, another list of demands. But when she closes the door behind her, Daniel doesn't hand her papers or dictate schedules. He just stands there, watching her with a gaze that burns. The air is heavy, almost unbearable, until he crosses the space between them in 3 deliberate steps. And then, without warning, he kisses her. It's not soft or tentative. It's urgent, desperate, the kind of kiss that speaks of months of restraint snapping all at once. Julia freezes, her breath stolen, then pushes him away, her hands trembling. "This is wrong," she whispers, voice cracking. "You're my boss." Daniel's jaw clenches. For a moment, she thinks he'll retreat, apologize, pretend it never happened. Instead, his eyes blaze as he murmurs, "I don't care about rules." "I care about you." Julia stares at him, her chest tight. She doesn't know what terrifies her more, the possibility that he's lying or the chance that he means it. Power, she knows, is dangerous. And Daniel Cross has more of it than anyone she's ever known. The next days at the office feel different. Julia swears people are looking at her longer, whispering when she passes by, though she can't tell if it's her paranoia or something real. But the atmosphere shifts, lingering glances from coworkers, sly smiles she can't quite interpret. And then the rumors start. A comment here, a joke there. The boss seems awfully fond of his secretary, doesn't he? Julia keeps her head down, but her cheeks burn with every passing remark. It's Evelyn Grant who makes it worse. Evelyn, one of the company's senior executives, is everything Julia is not: polished, ruthless, and hungry for power. With her sharp suits and sharper tongue, she carries an authority that makes even men twice her age step aside. One afternoon, Evelyn corners Julia in the ladies' lounge, her tone deceptively friendly. "Be careful, sweetheart," she purrs, applying lipstick in the mirror. "Men like Daniel, they have a pattern. You're just another assistant in a long line of disposable toys. He'll use you, enjoy you, and toss you aside when he's bored. Julia's stomach twists, but she forces a smile, brushing it off as petty manipulation. You don't know what you're talking about, she mutters. Evelyn only laughs, her eyes glittering. Don't I? The words lodge like splinters beneath Julia's skin. She wants to dismiss them, to believe Daniel's intensity means something deeper. But Evelyn's smirk, her effortless cruelty, leaves Julia shaken. For the first time, doubt creeps in, ugly, corrosive, and impossible to ignore. The seed of suspicion blooms that night. Julia is finishing her reports when she hears voices echoing down the hallway. One of them is Daniel's, low, firm, edged with tension. The other is unmistakably Evelyn's, smooth, controlled, laced with a faint amusement. Julia hesitates, her heart lurching as she follows the sound toward his office. Through the glass, she sees them, Daniel leaning across his desk, his posture taut, Evelyn standing close, too close, her expression smug. They're speaking in hushed tones, but Julia catches fragments, loyalty, risk. Keep it quiet. It's enough to twist her stomach into knots. And then Evelyn turns, her eyes locking with Julia's through the open doorway. A slow, deliberate smirk spreads across her face as she brushes past, perfume trailing like smoke. Good night, darling, Evelyn says sweetly, the word dripping with poison. Julia stands frozen, her chest hollow. Daniel doesn't even look at her as he shuffles papers on his desk, as if nothing has happened. But Julia feels it, a fracture, small but widening, slicing through the fragile trust that had begun to grow. Was Evelyn right all along? Is she just another disposable distraction? She walks away before he can call her name, her throat tight, her thoughts a storm. For the first time since stepping into Daniel's orbit, Julia feels not flattered, not desired, but played. And the possibility that she's nothing more than a pawn in his world makes her blood run cold. Against her better judgment, Julia lets herself fall. It starts with stolen glances across the office, then midnight texts that leave her staring at her phone with a pounding heart. Soon, it's late-night drives to quiet hotel rooms, where the polished CEO becomes a man undone, where Daniel's kisses drown out every doubt she's tried to hold on to. With him, the world feels sharper, more dangerous, like every touch could shatter her or set her on fire. For Julia, it's intoxicating, this mix of secrecy and passion, this sense of being wanted by the one man everyone else fears. But as their romance deepens behind locked doors, the world outside grows colder. Her colleagues no longer meet her eyes in the break room. Friends at work stop inviting her to lunch. Whispers coil through the hallways like smoke. She's sleeping her way to the top. Julia hears them, feels the sting of every word, but Daniel dismisses her concerns. They don't matter, he tells her, pulling her close. Only we do, yet the isolation cuts deep. Julia begins to wonder if in choosing him, she's losing everything else, her friendships, her reputation, her sense of belonging. The secrecy that once thrilled her now feels suffocating, like a shadow she can't escape. At first, Daniel's protectiveness feels flattering, even thrilling. He insists on car services picking her up at night, tells her not to trust certain colleagues, warns her about anyone who gets too close. You don't understand, Julia, he says, voice low, eyes intense. People will tear us apart. I have to protect us, but slowly that protectiveness sharpens into something heavier, darker. He grows possessive, demanding to know where she's going, why she's late, who she's talking to. He calls it caution. She starts to wonder if it's control. When she tries to push back, his temper flares, quick and cutting. I've built everything I have by never letting anyone in. Don't make me regret letting you in, he snaps one night. And Julia is left staring at the man she's given her heart to, wondering if she ever truly knew him. The contrast unsettles her. The Daniel who holds her tenderly in secret versus the Daniel who rules his empire with ice. She loves him, she tells herself, but the line between love and fear blurs more each day. And in her quiet moments, when she lies awake staring at the ceiling, she begins to ask herself questions she doesn't want the answers to. Is this empowering, being desired by a man like him? Or is she losing herself piece by piece to a story she never chose to write? The breaking point arrives suddenly, like a knife slid under the table. An anonymous tip is sent to HR. Julia Parker is engaged in an inappropriate relationship with her boss. The words ripple through the company like wildfire, igniting gossip and suspicion. Julia is summoned, questioned, her every interaction dissected under fluorescent lights. Sitting in that sterile room facing HR officers who look at her with thinly veiled judgment, she feels naked, exposed. She expects Daniel to step forward, to defend her, to take the weight of responsibility. But in the company's official meeting, he denies everything. His voice is steady, cold, professional. There's no such conduct. Miss Parker is a valued employee. Rumors are harmful distractions. To the outside world, he erases her, distances himself to protect his empire. Julia sits there, humiliated, the walls closing in as whispers confirm her worst fears. Evelyn's fingerprints are all over this. Julia can almost see her smirk in the background, savoring the destruction she set in motion. And Daniel, the man who once told her he cared about nothing but her, now treats her like a liability. The betrayal slices deep. When she leaves that meeting, head bowed, she no longer feels like the ambitious young woman who once dared to challenge a CEO. She feels like prey, used, silenced, and left to carry the weight of a love story that has turned into a weapon. The breaking point comes in the quiet of Daniel's office, the same room where everything began. Julia stands rigid by the door, her fists clenched at her sides, her voice trembling but unyielding. You said I wasn't disposable. Prove it. The words hang heavy in the air, charged with both desperation and defiance. Daniel sits behind his sleek desk, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For the first time, Julia sees cracks in his armor, the tension in his shoulders, the weight of the board breathing down his neck. Yet when she begs for the truth, for him to stand beside her rather than above her, he says nothing. His silence isn't neutral. It's a choice. Every second he doesn't speak, every heartbeat that ticks by is a knife sinking deeper into her chest. His betrayal isn't an outburst or an accusation. It's worse. It's indifference. The man who kissed her like he would break without her, the man who whispered she was different, now sits stone-faced, unwilling to risk his empire for her dignity. Julia feels the air leave her lungs, her world tilting, shattering under the weight of his cowardice. She turns away, tears stinging but unshed. In that moment, she realizes the silence is louder than any confession and far more devastating. That the universe isn't finished with her yet. Days later, while gathering files for what she plans will be her last week in the company, Julia uncovers something buried deep in a folder Evelyn had carelessly left behind. At first, it's just numbers, contracts, expense reports, but then she sees it. Forged documents, deliberately doctored, pointing to fraudulent approvals tied to her name. The implication is damning. Julia, the loyal secretary, stealing from the very company she's given her youth to. Her blood runs cold as the realization slams into her. Evelyn orchestrated the entire scheme, crafting a trap so precise it left no escape. And worse, Daniel signed off. His signature, bold and unapologetic, stares back at her like a brand. He hadn't even questioned it. He hadn't even looked. The man who claimed to see her more clearly than anyone else had reduced her to nothing more than a line item on a document, a liability to be checked off without hesitation. Rage and heartbreak twist inside her chest, a storm threatening to tear her apart. It isn't just Evelyn who destroyed her, it's Daniel's complicity, his blind willingness to sacrifice her without a fight. Betrayal, she realizes, doesn't always come with lies or cruelty. Sometimes it's just the absence of faith when you need it most. The boardroom is packed the next morning, the atmosphere thick with anticipation as quarterly results are unveiled. Julia steps inside, her resignation letter clutched but unread. Every eye swivels to her, some curious, others smug, Evelyn's most of all. Daniel is at the head of the table, immaculate in his suit, his expression unreadable. Without waiting for permission, Julia moves to the center of the room, her voice clear, steady, unshakable. "I resign," she says, placing the letter on the polished wood. Murmurs ripple, but she doesn't falter. Her gaze locks on Daniel, refusing to let him look away. "You didn't just betray me," she says, every word sharp, cutting. "You betrayed yourself. The man who told me I wasn't disposable turned out to be the one who threw me away the fastest." Silence falls, heavier than any storm. For a flicker of a moment, Julia sees something in his eyes, regret, anguish, maybe even love, but it's buried beneath the steel mask he wears for the world. She doesn't wait for him to speak. She doesn't want his excuses. Instead, she turns, her heels echoing like gunshots against the marble floor as she walks out, the doors slamming shut behind her. Daniel remains frozen at the head of the table, the room buzzing with whispers. For the first time in his carefully controlled life, he feels powerless, watching the only person who ever dared to challenge him, the only person who ever truly saw him disappear by her own choice. The empire around him is intact, but Daniel Cross has never felt more hollow. Months pass, and the city feels different to Julia now. Not less sharp, not less brutal, but survivable. She no longer spends her days in glass towers running on fear and adrenaline. Instead, she finds herself at a modest law firm tucked into the corner of Midtown, the kind of place where files are stacked high but people know each other's names. It's not glamorous, but it's hers. The partners value her quick mind, and they encourage her when she rushes off after hours to attend night classes for law. For the first time since stepping into Daniel Cross's orbit, Julia feels like she's steering her own ship. Her mother beams with pride every time Julia visits. Ethan studies beside her at the kitchen table, and together they form a circle of quiet, steadfast support. It isn't easy. She works long hours, her eyes burn from late-night reading, and sometimes she questions if she's strong enough to juggle it all. But each small victory, a professor's praise, a client's thank you, the good grade on a tough exam, reminds her that this path, though slower, is real. More importantly, it's hers alone. The scars of betrayal remain, but they don't define her. They've sharpened her resolve. Every step forward whispers a truth she once feared to believe. She is more than someone's secretary, more than someone's secret. She is a woman carving her own legacy, one case, one class, one choice at a time. Meanwhile, Daniel Cross's empire holds steady on the outside, but inside, cracks spider through its foundation. Without Julia, his days are colder, his nights restless. He throws himself deeper into work, but the victories ring hollow. Evelyn, ever ambitious, slips into the gaps Julia once filled, not with loyalty, but with cunning. She maneuvers her way up the chain, whispering poison into board members' ears, smiling as she turns Daniel's own detachment against him. Slowly, he loses ground. Projects stall, trust fractures, and Daniel finds himself isolated in the very empire he built to avoid loneliness. His employees obey but no longer admire. Investors watch him with wary eyes. And in quiet moments, he sees Julia's face, not in memory of passion, but in memory of truth. She had been the only one to stand up to him, the only one to care about the man behind the mask. And he let her go. Worse, he betrayed her in the same way his father betrayed him, with silence, with the absence of faith. One night, staring out the window of his penthouse, whiskey burning his throat, Daniel finally understands. His empire is intact, but his soul is bankrupt. The woman who might have saved him is gone, not because she was weak, but because she was stronger than he ever allowed himself to be. Julia closes her journal one evening after class, exhaustion heavy but her spirit light. She has been writing again, not emails, not dictated notes, but her own words. Thoughts that once tangled in her chest now flow onto paper, clean and sharp. Tonight she writes a simple truth, born from the ashes of her past. Love should never cost your dignity. Success should never silence your voice. She reads the sentence twice, then underlines it, sealing it like a vow. These words aren't for Daniel or Evelyn or anyone else who once tried to shape her story. They're for her, for the girl who once thought survival meant silence, for the woman who now knows strength means speaking, even if your voice shakes. Julia smiles, faint but real, as she looks around her tiny apartment, the textbooks, the legal pads, the family photos taped to the fridge. It isn't the life she once imagined in glittering skyscrapers, but it's a beginning, and it belongs to her. Outside, tea. The city hums, endless and indifferent, but Julia feels grounded. She is no longer chasing someone else's approval or hiding in someone else's shadow. She has taken back her name, her choices, her future. Whatever comes next, the bar exam, the cases, the inevitable setbacks, she will face them not as Daniel's secretary, not as a rumor, not as disposable. She will face them as Julia Parker, resilient, unbroken, and finally free. The classroom is hushed, the air thick with anticipation as Julia rises to deliver her closing argument in her first mock trial. She straightens her blazer, not a designer label, not tailored to impress, but hers bought with her own paycheck. As she steps forward, her heart pounds, but her voice emerges steady, clear, resonant. Every word she speaks is rooted in conviction, not fear. She doesn't stumble. She doesn't falter. Instead, she builds her argument piece by piece, weaving law with empathy, logic with passion. For years, Julia's worth was measured in whispers, rumors, stolen moments in boardrooms and hotel rooms. But tonight, in this modest lecture hall filled with peers and professors, she stands tall on her own merit. When the verdict is announced in her favor, applause ripples through the room, but Julia doesn't glow from the recognition. She glows because, for the first time, she has heard her own voice echo back to her, strong, unshaken, commanding. It isn't about Daniel. It isn't about Evelyn. It isn't about redemption in anyone else's eyes. It's about this singular, defining moment where she finally believes she is enough. Later that night, Julia leaves the campus and takes the long way home. The city hums with neon lights and hurried footsteps, and the air carries that mix of ambition and exhaustion unique to New York nights. She turns a corner and finds herself in front of the skyscraper, that skyscraper, the one that once loomed over her like both a promise and a prison. The glass walls glint coldly in the night, reflecting everything she used to want, everything she lost, and everything she survived. Julia pauses for just a breath, her reflection faint in the mirrored surface. For a fleeting second, she remembers the girl who walked in here on her first day, hopeful, terrified, desperate to belong. But instead of looking up in awe or bitterness, she simply exhales, adjusts her bag on her shoulder, and keeps walking. No backward glance. No lingering ache. Just freedom. Across the street, unseen by her, a black car idles. Inside, Daniel sits, watching. His ties loosened, his eyes tired, his face drawn with regret. He could step out. He could call her name. But he doesn't. He knows it's too late. And perhaps that's the punishment he deserves, to witness her liberation from a distance, unable to reach what he once took for granted. Julia's footsteps carry her into the glowing rhythm of the city night, each stride purposeful, unhurried, her figure blending with the endless stream of people chasing their own destinies. Her heart no longer aches for validation, no longer bends under shame. Instead, it beats with certainty, not that life will be easy, but that it will be hers. Her mind recalls a truth she once buried beneath secrecy and fear, a truth she now speaks in her own voice. I was his secretary once, but now I'm my own boss. The words are not bitter. They're not a weapon aimed at Daniel or Evelyn or anyone who tried to cage her. They are simply fact, a declaration of selfhood. In that moment, Julia feels the city embrace her not as a backdrop to someone else's story, but as the canvas for her own. The skyscrapers no longer tower over her. They are just buildings. The whispers no longer echo in her ears. They are just noise. She steps into the crosswalk as the light changes, head held high, the glow of streetlights painting her path forward. Behind her, Daniel's car fades into the blur of traffic. Ahead of her, the unknown stretches wide. Julia doesn't hesitate. She doesn't flinch. She walks forward, powerful, independent, unbroken.